Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Surgery Podcast. My name is Nikki Clinch, and I am your host. We have another episode of our Surrender series for you today, where I get to sit with the amazing Zoe Blaskey. Zoe is the founder of the hugely successful Motherkind podcast, which is a self-empowerment platform for modern mums. Through Motherkind, Zoe coaches mothers of all backgrounds, from global CEOs to full-time mums, on how to navigate a huge challenge that is motherhood. Zoe is the host of the Motherkind podcast, which is the UK's #1 family podcast on iTunes today. She is an amazing human being. And in this episode, Zoe shares with us the huge process of surrender that she had to go through when she became pregnant with her first daughter. That transition of letting go of all these ideas and pictures of how things should be and who she should be and how she should be doing it in order to completely surrender to what is. Zoe shares with us the healing journey she went through when she was pregnant that led to her having the home birth that she dreamed of. And then the huge transformational process of actually becoming a mother, learning how to be mother, which then led to her, of course, birthing Motherkind. It's an amazing story and so inspirational. And I hope that you get so much from listening to her. Any aha moments, any shifts in perception, any huge insights that you get from listening to this, please do share with me. I love to hear your healing. You can write a comment in the comments below the YouTube video or the Instagram post, or you can write me a message directly through my website, www.nikkiclinch.com. My book Surrender is now available all over the world where you can buy books. You can buy it on my website as well. And if you love this podcast and love this content, then please do leave us a review, because your reviews really matter and help this content spread far and wide. And do, of course, subscribe to our Soul Surgery channel. So thank you for listening. I can't wait for you to hear this episode. Over to Zoe Blaskey. Zoe. Hello.
Hi, my love.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. I was saying just before we started recording, it's 9 a.m. we're recording here. So with 2 kids, it's quite frantic the mornings. I'm sure you have that too. So I'm just settling actually from the kind of, the 30 things I've already done this morning, none of which are for me. Cajoling a 5-year-old to her new school, the 2-year-old can't find her shoes, breakfast, toys, book bags, homework, snacks.
Yeah.
So then just coming to sit with you. So it's almost like just clawing back all that fragmented energy, it's just scatters, doesn't it?
Yes. And you really are in a new routine, same routine, new life, because you've just moved, haven't you?
Yeah. And the routine's very different. London, we've just moved from London to Dorset. Not as big as your move, unfortunately. But for me, quite a big thing. We're by
that's a
the
big
sea
deal.
well. Yeah, we're by the sea. It's beautiful. But actually the pace of life, even though we're in the same country, we're in the same school system. Jessie's London school, she's only 5, but she had to be there at 8. And I really challenged it with the school. Like, that seems insane to me. So early to get out the door and, everything that has to go with it. Whereas the Dorset school is 9-10. So actually our mornings look really different. Still frantic because, it's life. But, a lot more room to, Jessie can have a play in the morning. We can connect. And
yeah.
So it's, I think the thing, I don't know if you found this when you left London, but you just get used to the pace of London.
Mm-hmm.
Just get used to it. I was there 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I can almost feel my nervous system just kind of slowing a bit already here.
Yep.
Like I asked a mum for a coffee and she had like 10 available dates for me this week. It's like in London, you ask someone for a coffee and they give you a date 3 months in the future.
Like 3 months away. If you're lucky. No, here I can just text someone in the morning, and I can meet them in like half an hour up the road.
Yeah, it's different.
It's
It's different. I
unbelievable.
think I love the energy of London. I love it. And, it served me so well. And, but I think that just for me came a time when I just wanted that slower pace and more spaciousness and to be by the sea. And
but it's all really new still, because how long has it been?
10 days.
Okay. So it's super, super new. And just a little bit from our experience, it really takes a good 2 or 3 months before you start realizing that you're not just visiting. And, this is life now. This is not just like a holiday, an extended holiday. And, you guys you'll go through different phases of integrating this shift. And, for us, it's taking almost the whole year for it just keeps getting deeper and deeper, and until we realize, this is really permanent now. Yeah. So
yeah, I think I can see that, particularly as we didn't plan very well. So we moved, and then we had a family wedding that weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a week of new life, and Jessie started her new school, my 5-year-old. And then we had a big, friendship group camping trip. So it's kind of like our feet have not touched the floor yet. And I'm really aware of that in my energy. And, and I struggle as well. I don't know if you found this, like I do struggle in external chaos. Like the house is just chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like every room that I walk into, what I see is a kind of to-do list. And so I'm really practicing just not allowing that to color the magic of this time, like just seeing the mess, and then just trying to allow it to just be, and not think about when I'm going to get that done. Or it's new for me because in the past I definitely would have, pushed myself to get it all sorted within a week, and I'm not doing that. It's still chaos, and it probably, hopefully, will be in a few months still, because then I would have probably surrendered to it. So that's what I'm practicing at the moment, is just, can I have a really calm inner world with a really chaotic, messy, can't find anything, boxes everywhere, outer world?
Mm-hmm. And you said the magic word. The magic word is surrender. And that's why I've invited you here, because I wanted to speak with you about what, I've been sitting with people such as yourself, who have platforms, who have spaces of impact in the world. And I thought it was really useful and interesting to have you share your human story about the greatest point of surrender in your life, and the process in which you had to face it, travel through it, journey through it, learn from it, what surprised you, and then the gifts that came out the other side. And because I just think I don't think we can hear these stories enough, that actually it takes enormous courage, and that these points that feel like breakdowns or like the ends of something are actually the beginnings of something tremendous, or could be. And just following on from what you just said about finding stillness in external chaos, I would imagine that is a gift that comes from having journeyed through a lot of chaos, or from learning how to navigate through the chaos so many times. And then eventually there's the gift of being able to go, maybe I can just let that be the way it is today, and I don't have to let it affect me. But I want to hear from you. So when I say to you the biggest point of surrender in your life, what was the first thing that came to mind?
Without a doubt, it was becoming a mother for the first time. Without a doubt. Yeah, when you said that when we first joined and you said that's, what I want to talk about, it just was unequivocal that is my biggest point of surrender.
Mm-hmm. So share with us, who were you before that point? Like who was Zoe? Who were you being in the world? How was your life? How did you think of yourself? Like share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I mean it's fascinating because like anything, it's not a neat story, and I think sometimes there's a desire to want to make these stories kind of neat in a bow, and that wasn't my experience. I, grew up in a very perfect looking but very emotionally dysfunctional family, very loving. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of addiction in my family. There was a lot of secrecy. There was a lot of unresolved trauma. And when I was 23, I was given the gift of a breakdown, which is another point of surrender, but not the one I'm going to talk about today. And yeah, that breakdown, really opened me because I found a 12-step fellowship called Al-Anon, which is for family and friends of addicts and alcoholics. Mm-hmm. And that really, for the first time in my life, I started to question what I thought of myself. I had cripplingly low esteem, which I would mask with achievement. So I was a very, very high achiever. Never got a B my whole life. Whatever I did, I aced. That was how I masked what was going on underneath, which of course is going to play into my motherhood narrative when we get to it, because I thought I could apply the same coping tool. And of course, It does not work that way. So I was given the gift of this breakdown, and, I was suicidal at my lowest point. I'd coped for so long with what was going on in my family. My family had a year of quite a spectacular implosion. I don't talk about the details out of, boundary for my family, but it was very, very, very full on. And I coped through that. I coped through that. Not functionally. I was drinking a lot. I was experimenting with recreational drugs a lot. I was working till midnight, 1 a.m. every night. And I was only a graduate on a graduate scheme. It didn't require that level of hours. I was just avoiding myself. That was how I coped. And I'm very grateful for those, because those adaptations enabled me to survive that time. But then as my family started to stabilize somewhat, that's when I fell apart, which is very typical in, family dysfunctional stories. The coper falls apart when the other people start to get well again.
Yep.
And I luckily found Al-Anon, and that gave me this idea of spirituality, and it gave me this idea of challenging some of what I thought of myself, and it gave me a way to create some structure in my life, and my esteem started to rise. And throughout my 20s, so I was 23, and that enabled me to find a job that I felt more suited to, enabled me to start dating more appropriate people, although that was a big old journey, and then ultimately enabled me to meet my now husband when I was 29. But I still, I would say I hadn't fully surrendered at that point to a spiritual way of life. I would still allow my will to determine, even though I had a sense of what would be the highest good for me, sometimes I was still unable to do that for myself. So I would still take the low road. I'd still push the easy button at times. I didn't get sober until I was 31. So I was still drinking at that point when I met my husband. And we got married, and that was a whole interesting experience in itself around surrender, because we had pre-marriage therapy, which was one of the best things that we'd done. Yeah, it was one of the best things.
That's quite unusual to have pre-marriage therapy. What caused you to do that?
Well, I was reflecting on it. I was talking to lots of, I guess, awakened people about marriage. And I was talking about how with the absence of religion, whereas religion, typically in the past, you would speak to your vicar or your rabbi about your issues on how you felt about money, how you felt about sharing childcare, how you felt about each other's careers, how you felt about sex, how you felt about where you wanted to live, all these things. And very slowly it kind of dawned on me, actually, we need a container to talk about those really important things. And so I found a therapist to help us talk about those things. She almost did like a pre-marriage course for us, where we would talk about, it was incredibly powerful. And we would do these coaching exercises. Like, I remember sat down and, we had like the wedding invitations piled high on one side of the table. And then on the other side, we were doing this coaching exercise, which was writing out our hopes and our fears for marriage, what we think marriage is. And it was really powerful. It hasn't made it plain sailing, but it definitely helped.
I think most people are it's not that dissimilar to having a baby, actually. You're so focused on the wedding, you're so focused on the birth, that you're really not prepared for the actual marriage.
Exactly.
And it kind of can hit you like a ton of bricks when you realize that what you wanted was the wedding, but what you end up with is the marriage. That's the part you have to live.
Exactly. And interestingly, I did the same with the birth. So we got pregnant very quickly, and it was fascinating, actually, that the surrender, even through the pregnancy and the birth experience, because my mother and father-in-law said to me, we'll pay for you to have your baby at a private hospital. I was like, amazing. So I went to look around one of these very posh private hospitals in London, and I was probably 13 weeks pregnant. I had not done any research. I knew nothing. What I saw was the menu. I was like, wow, I was pretty, you can order whatever you want. I was thinking, this is incredible. It's like a hotel.
I've never seen a menu like that.
Yeah, it was amazing. There were a couple of interesting flags, where there's this lovely consultant, but she was saying to me, so I'll let you do this. And when you get to this point, I'll do this. And even then, I hadn't done any research on birth, or, those were kind of flags to me, because I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, this is my experience. And at the time, I was very, very deepening my spiritual life. And I was reading a lot of books by American authors who kept talking about this Kundalini teacher called Gurmukh Khalsa. Every book that I picked up mentioned her name. And I'd had an experience, actually at a Gabrielle Bernstein workshop in London, where she had led a Kundalini meditation that was almost like an awakening for me. It was incredibly powerful and actually led me to surrendering to becoming a mother. So we went on holiday, and I was in Tulum, and we were meant to go to this yoga class, and the teacher didn't show up. And the studio came out and said, listen, I'm going to send another teacher. It's going to be half an hour. Do you want to wait? Pretty much no one waited around. And Guy and I were like, we're on holiday. We've got nothing else to do. So we hung around. And through the door, I'd never done a Kundalini class. I'd only read about this woman. And through the door walks this kind of vision in white. And it was a Kundalini teacher. And I was about to do my first Kundalini class, totally unknowingly. And I said to her at the end, I'm just getting so into yoga, and now I'm pregnant. I was going to do my teacher training this year, but now I'm pregnant, so I can't. And she said, why don't you do pregnancy training? Be a great time when you've got the experience. And I just thought that's a great idea. When you have that knowing, I didn't question it. I was like, that's a great idea. And my next thought, which was definitely not from myself, it was definitely a higher thought, was you should see if that Kundalini teacher in LA does pregnancy training. At the time, I had no idea she was the pioneer of pregnancy training. She almost invented pregnancy yoga. I didn't know that. So I looked her up, and as the universe would have it, she was doing her first ever training in Europe that summer, which would fit perfectly with the timings of my pregnancy. She'd only ever done them in LA before, and I probably wouldn't have gone to LA pregnant on my own. So that experience and surrendering to those intuitive nudges. Didn't make sense on paper. I'd never done a Kundalini class. Why would I go and do Kundalini training? But it just felt right. On paper, I cannot tell you, it made zero sense. It was quite a lot of money. It was 2 weeks away from Guy and work, and I just knew.
Amazing.
And so I booked it straight away. Never booked anything as quickly, never made an investment as quickly without thinking about it. I just knew. And now I can see, looking back, joining the dots, that this was all part of my purpose to what I do today, Motherkind. I had no idea at the time. I had no idea. I was a marketing consultant. You know, that's what I was doing. That's how I was earning my money. That was my plan as far as I knew it. And I just fully surrendered into this experience, and I found myself on an island in Sweden. To this date, it's probably, apart from birthing my baby, is the best experience of my life. There was 40 women from all around the world, incredibly awakened women, all Kundalini teachers apart from me.
Wow.
Half of them were midwives. So I had 2 weeks with probably now like some of the best midwives, you know, in the world were there on this training, because Gurmukh is so revered and she only does one of these trainings a year. And so they would talk to me at break, right? And at lunch and in the classes, you know, what's the plan? And they would talk to me about these ideas that I'd never heard of: conscious birth, conscious parenting. You know, about the first 5 years, we watched documentary after documentary with Gurmukh. You know, there were long days. The training was kind of 12 to 15 hour days. We were doing 200 squats a day. I've never been stronger or fitter. Wow. We were doing rebirthing. We were doing ecstatic dance. We were doing, I mean, it was not a yoga training. It was so much more than that. It was so much more than that. And that really was my point of awakening into my motherhood journey, which it's still, to me, when I tell the story, you know, it's funny, I don't tell it that often these days. It's so fascinating to me how it didn't make any sense on paper. And yet there I was, just having this experience. And I'll tell you something that was funny, Nikki, because I'd never done Kundalini before. I didn't know that you had to wear white. So I just packed my normal yoga clothes, like my black Lululemons. I mean, it's so embarrassing when I think about it. And I got there and they were like, no, you have to wear white. And so all these women like pulled all their clothes for me. Like everyone loaned me a piece of clothing so that I could be in white too. It was just so special. And at the end, there were 40 women and there were 3 of us that were pregnant, and Gurmukh reveres the pregnant woman, as it should be, as it is in many cultures. So everyone had to do dharma, washing up, you know, cleaning, not us. You know, people had to give us treatments every day because there were reflexologists there were Reiki masters there were sound healers there. So every day someone had to gift us a treatment. It was unbelievable. And at the end, they did a ceremony for us. And I feel emotional because it was one of the most powerful moments of my life, where they kind of, you know, all these women stood in a circle with us and, you know, wrote down their wishes for me as a mother and the wishes for my child. And it was just so beautiful. So beautiful. And of course, I got back to London, and there was actually an incredible thing that happened halfway through the week as well, which I will just share. That so halfway through this week, I decide that I'm going to have a home birth. I'm going to tell my in-laws, thank you very much for the offer of the very generous, posh, private London hospital, but I'm going to have a baby at home. And I was sat one night in meditation. We had to meditate for, you know, a lot of hours a day. And my thoughts were wandering, how am I going to sell this to Guy? You know, how am I going to sell this idea of a home birth to Guy? He's not going to go for it. He's so scientific and medical. How is he going to come out of that meditation? And I swear to God, I look at my phone and there's a message from Guy, and it says, I've just been out with the lads. We're all talking about their births, you know, because obviously I was pregnant, got onto the subject. He said, everyone said it was horrific, apart from one friend who'd had a home birth and said it was amazing. And the way he talked about it, I think we should consider it. Would you be up for it?
Wow.
So that was that. But we had to, again, I had to really, really lean into the power that those women gave me. I didn't know anyone that had had a home birth. And, my in-laws in particular found that decision really hard. They couldn't talk to us about it. It was really difficult. I really had to lean into my power and my decision. And that was my first big surrender of becoming a mother.
That's such an amazing story. What I want to ask you is, and you can see that I'm kind of really I want to ask you this question. When you say that was my biggest point of awakening, let's try and break this down. Do you remember, I know it was a while ago, but do you remember when you were in the process and everything's new and you're in the group and you're doing all the dance and the meditation? Do you remember the actual shift that was starting to happen in your perception of yourself and what is possible and old ideas versus new openings? Do you remember those shifts?
Yeah. There's a moment, and I think I'll talk the internal experience up until that moment. The juxtaposition between being 4 months pregnant, being squashed onto the Northern Line every morning because I was commuting to a consulting job in the city, no one giving me a seat, having to ask every single morning for a seat, feeling pretty disconnected to the baby, feeling like there's a lot of negativity, people trying to tell me, their horrific birth stories, and the juxtaposition to being on this island in Sweden with this woman who were revering me. Yeah. Unlocked a sense of worth in me that I didn't know existed from other women.
Yeah.
And I remember this moment. It's still, I picture it, you say, do you remember? I can picture it like I'm there now. I'd gone out to the toilet because obviously I was going to the toilet every 20 minutes, which was actually quite a nice break when we were doing like 3-hour-long meditations. So I need the toilet again.
Yeah.
Such a skiver. Anyway, I'd gone to the toilet probably for the 10th time that morning. And it was a beautiful setting. It was this remote island and the birds were singing, and I walked out to the toilet and I went in and I came back up and I walked along this kind of rickety wooden path into the hall where we were doing the training, and I opened the door and I could just hear this music. And I opened the door and there were these women, 39 of them, in ecstatic dance, a sea of white. And some people were crying with joy. Some people were sobbing with pain of what was being released. There was my two pregnant friends there, holding their bellies, swaying. And I stood there and time froze. I just burst into tears because I realized in that moment that there was all of life in that room and everyone was holding it for each other. There was so much authenticity and no one had their mask on. And I realized that that's really what life was about. And I realized how out of alignment in many ways my life was at that point, because I was putting a mask on every day and going off to work in the city, and I hated it.
So in that moment, something died. An idea of who you'd been being, and that was as good as it gets, just kind of started to dissolve.
I just started crying with joy. I just thought, I didn't know that you could experience that much joy sober with a bunch of strangers. I was like, this is what happens when you connect to spirit and soul. And Gurmukh, I know you know her. She's on another plane. She's 76. She's been meditating for almost that long. She's unbelievable, the space that she held. Yeah, and I think from that moment of seeing that, I've never really been the same. And I guess unconsciously, my subconscious, it wasn't conscious, decided that I would spend the rest of my life doing this work. I didn't know that at the time. Yeah, so off I went back to London, a different person, but the same person, right? People didn't know that I had changed in this way, but I felt totally different. You know, I was listening, I was, deep into Kundalini at that point. I'd be doing it 5-6 hours a day. I'd quit the consultancy. I told Guy he had to support me for the last couple of months of my pregnancy. I was like, that's it.
Yep.
And I had this incredible birth. And I think because I had that experience, I assumed that I would be this earth mother, and that I would have this easy, because Gurmukh was teaching us, it's just about connection. You'd be present with your baby. It's about connection. And that wasn't my experience. And that was really the greatest challenge of my life. Again, the juxtaposition came up, of this great desire to be this kind of earth mother, and the mothers that I'd seen in Sweden, and to emulate them. And I wanted to be kind of breastfeeding in a boost sling all the time, and that wasn't my experience. And that's really the bulk of the surrender, is surrendering to what it was actually like for me, which was unbelievably hard, because what I hadn't prepared for at all was that all of my old coping behaviors, all of them came very quickly when I was at my most vulnerable. So, my kind of core wounding leads me to give my power away to experts. I started doing that. I started trying to speed read books on how to breastfeed in between feeds, because breastfeeding wasn't working. I had feeding consultant after feeding consultant, some of which were, looking back, almost abusive with how much they were telling me I had to just make this work. My perfectionism came to the surface. I became obsessed with routine and getting Jessie to nap in routine.
Yep.
I really, really, really struggled. I totally lost my spiritual connection through sleep deprivation. Jessie didn't really sleep for a year. She's still not a great sleeper now. We also had so many challenges, Guy and I. At one point I thought we were going to break up. Yeah, at one point I thought we're not going to survive this. I now know that is incredibly normal. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know. I was like, what is this? And I, stopped going to Al-Anon meetings. I couldn't get to them. I would try and listen to some meditations and kind of spiritual stuff, but I think what it did is it threw me back into survival.
Yes.
And all of my survival tools that had helped me survive a very chaotic, dysfunctional childhood, I tried to use to help me survive the first year of motherhood. And it was unbelievably painful because I knew what I was doing. I also had this high expectation of myself, given this incredible experience and this home birth in Gurmukh. And so I definitely had postnatal anxiety. I would feel very, very anxious. Very low. I didn't feel like myself. It was, now I know, a very normal experience of the first year of motherhood, actually. Very normal, which is what ultimately led me to Motherkind. But at the time, I couldn't surrender to it. I found it, I was fighting the experience. And just wishing that it was different. I wasn't enjoying it. I look back on photos of me in that first year, and I can see the struggle in my face. I can see the sadness. I can see the loss. Really.
You know, I just want to come in and just add this. You know, one thing that just doesn't get to be spoken enough about is, you know, when we have babies, it is the ultimate opening of love. It is the purest, most intense love that we've experienced. And love is the trigger point for all the aspects that there have been pain, unhealed wounds in the past. So of course, this baby that is this opening for love also opens every single aspect that makes us want to survive, that we survived heartbreak in the past. So it makes perfect sense. But when you're in it, it's like you can't see the wood for the trees.
No, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when Jessie was about 8 months, I would say, that I had another mini breakdown.
Yep.
In a lot of ways. And I remembered that there's another way. And I started to see a little bit of distance between my behaviours. I'm very controlling, perfectionist, beating myself up. My God, I was beating myself up. There was times when I thought, this baby would be better off without you. You're such a shit mum. Yeah, I was really, really, really struggled. And yeah, that was about 8 months, and I reached out to a therapist, an incredible somatic therapist. And that was the beginning of another surrender into a deeper healing than I ever thought possible. Because I don't know, unfortunately for me, and I think for most of the human experience, the gateway to healing is pain. And that was definitely my experience. I needed all that pain of those first 8 months with Jessie in order to gateway into, where I am now. And I started to do the things that I know that I needed to do. I picked up my journal again, and I would actually write about what was going on for me. I would meditate again. I reconnected with my spiritual communities. And then I started looking around, because I'd been consuming all of this content before, with spiritual teachers and, Marianne Williamson and Gabor Mate. And I started looking around for a motherhood platform about this stuff. I was like, I want to find someone who's talking about this experience of motherhood in this way, and who can bring these teachings and these teachers and put that spin on it, because that's what I wanted at the time. And I couldn't find one. I found Dr. Shefali, who is an American author of The Conscious Parent, and I consumed that book and I consumed her courses, and I actually went on and did some trainings with her, but I couldn't find anyone in the UK. And that was starting to plant a seed to, again, another massive surrender, which was that I could make this part of my purpose in the world.
Yeah. Before you go on there, I just want to track back a bit, because there was a really important point and I want to highlight it for the listeners. When you said you had another breakdown when Jessie was 8 months, and it led you to go and see the somatic therapist. Now, what I wanted to highlight was, and this is important for the listeners to hear, there was a moment before you made the decision to get in touch with that therapist. There's a moment that happens before we ask for help. And what do you know what that moment is?
I thought my marriage isn't going to survive this.
Yes, there's a moment when we are ready to say to ourselves, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, I thought if I don't get help now, I'm going to be a single parent. And I did not want that. I loved my husband. I love him today. But I could see how, we weren't going to survive it. And I knew that so much of that was on me.
I think that takes a certain amount of humility. And this is so important for people to hear, because we live in a world where we're obsessed, or we're taught that we should always know. We should know what to do. We should know where to go. We should have the answers. And if we don't, somehow we're missing it, or we're missing something. But actually, it's an enormous moment of humility and courage that is the beginning of transformation, when we can say, okay, I really don't know.
Well, it's the beginning of every surrender and transformation in my story. Is, the breakdown at 23, I was like, I am, can I swear? I am,
Yes.
fucked. I literally remember having, I call it my bathroom floor moment, and I've had many since.
Me too.
And I was on the bathroom floor, and I was like, I don't know. There's always, in my experience, you have to get to that point, the gift of desperation. I have to be desperate enough to get my ego out the way.
Yeah,
I have to be. Otherwise, my ego is going to try and protect, and keep it going and say, oh, I have got the answers, and I just need to read that book, or I just need to do that course, or I just need to, and then it will all be fine. There's such it's so, in a way, I wish it wasn't that way, because it's so painful, that place. It's so painful, and it's so scary. It feels like the floor is falling from under me and the walls are caving in. It's petrifying. But I now know, having been through that enough times, what's on the other side of that, which is some form of transformation and healing. And that's what happened. I remember it. I thought, I was just sobbing, and I was on the bed, and Jessie was lying next to me, 8 months old. And I thought, I've got to do something. And that was, this deeper healing that I'm, living today. And, I hadn't really done any body work up until that point. I hadn't done any somatic work. I'd not read Peter Levine. I hadn't read Body Keeps Score. That whole body of work was new to me. And that was really what unlocked a huge part of my healing and transformation. And and that started when Jessie was 8 months, which of course brings its own challenges, because I was still exhausted and still trying to get to grips with this motherhood and my role and the love and the pain and then again, the ultimate surrender was starting Motherkind, because my ego did not want me to do it at all.
Really? Why? What was it saying? What were the
because
thoughts?
I was very identified as a high flying career woman. I was putting on the suit, even though I was living this kind of closeted spiritual life from 23. Was very closeted. I would never talk about it to my friends. I would be reading business books on the train. Sometimes The Power of Now would be like tucked inside, and that's really what I'd be reading. But I had a lot of esteem from being the successful one.
Yeah.
From, I always assumed that I would be a CEO. Guy, my husband, laughs at me now. He's like, I can't believe that was your dream. Like, that was so embarrassing. But that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to, rise up the ranks in a corporation. And that came from such a broken place.
Yeah.
Such
that
a broken
was your way
place.
of surviving.
Exactly. And I didn't want to, have my face on Instagram talking about healing. I didn't want that at all. That's why I called it Motherkind. Didn't want my name on it. I was like, I'll just not have, I'll just do it in the background.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big
one
part
thing I want to bring up.
Oh, sorry, go on.
You go.
I was going to say, there was a big part of me that, wanted to share this. I really did. And I wanted to, talk about motherhood in this way. But I really had to surrender that defended ego that wanted me to continue to look very externally successful.
I have a chapter in my book called, a whole chapter dedicated to this. I call it letting go of pictures. That we get to this point where there's this picture of who we thought we needed to be. That's me. I'm going to be this one that looks like that. Like, this isn't me. But what's phenomenal as you're sharing your story, it's so obvious to me. I hope I'd like it to become clear for the listeners that in the midst of your breakdown, in the midst of the madness, something was being born. Motherkind had already been born.
Yeah, it had been born in that hall with those women. I just didn't know it. I just didn't know it then. And it had been born in the pain. Had I had an easy breezy first year with Jessie, I wouldn't have started Motherkind. No way, because I wouldn't have needed it.
Yeah.
So I needed...
Wouldn't have bothered.
Wouldn't have bothered. I would have just gone back and done my consultancy and got my day rate and lovely jubbly, But that the pain, I think the juxtaposition of the ecstasy and the joy and the spiritual awakening of being with those women in Sweden for that time and the home birth, and really juxtaposing that with the pain of seeing all this old behavior and really dysfunctional ways of coping, coming out for those first 8 months. It was those two things, the light and the shade of those two things, that led me ultimately to be able to surrender enough to start Motherkind. But I never would have started it without the pain. And I see that, I know you do as well. I see that day in, day out. The most beautiful things, I think, on this planet are born out of pain or an unmet need in someone. And they think, I'm going to go and do it myself. And I think it's so interesting how, it makes me laugh, these workshops like, 5 steps to figure out your purpose. I think you can't sit there and analyze your purpose. It comes to you through you living your life.
Yes, that's true. It's actually tapping on your shoulder in the midst of your tears.
Always. And, my mum said to me the other day, this made me laugh. She said, oh, well, I was talking about the podcast. She said, oh, well, I'm not surprised that you're doing a podcast. I said, what? She went, oh, well, when you were 5, all you ever wanted to do was play radios, and you used to record your voice and you'd play your voice back and you'd keep recording it until you got it perfect. I mean, obviously I was perfectionist, that's what you wanted to interview me and your dad and your brother, and you'd invite us onto your show. And I was like, what? Why didn't you tell me any of this when I was struggling, not knowing who I was or what I wanted to do, or, so now I can see that, those, when I can step into my higher self and let my true essence lead. I was born to do this. I love it. I was born to do it. But I think, had I not had those moments of unbelievable pain and surrender and then breakthrough, there's no way I'd be doing this. There's no way that I would be sitting still with a somatic therapist, a couple of hours a week. Because we need the pain. I need the pain. I won't speak for others. I need the pain in order to accelerate, as you were saying, that bathroom floor moment of, I don't know. I need that.
I think what's so remarkable to me, and I've been lucky enough to sit with a few people like yourself now interviewing for this series, and of course I wrote the book based on my own story as well, that what's so obvious to me is that the one that you've grown into, like you were saying, she was already recording her radio shows as a little girl. She was always there,
yes,
but buried underneath these ideas and these pictures and these survival strategies, just buried, and you would never have known she was there.
She was buried under trauma. And I when I was younger, all I wanted to do was be on stage and act and speak and sing, and and then I was cripplingly bullied, and which I know is a story for so many, particularly women, I think. And I just hid. I just hid. And I put on a suit, literally and metaphorically. And I just put my head down and I tried to achieve and I hid. And I think I feel so grateful for my family. Like, I feel so grateful that they had enough pain that forced me to look at my own, because I never, ever would have gone through the peeling those layers of trauma away, the healing, in order to get to the essence of who I am. And I'm still doing that. I think it's an ever lifetime assignment. I don't think you finish. It's not my experience. But
we hope not, because we always get to grow. We just keep growing and growing and growing. And that's the gift of it. And I think it's really important to highlight that the pain that you're speaking about, and I speak about too, it was always there. We just weren't able to really access it. What comes up is what is buried, and what we've disconnected from and what we've disassociated from. And so the pain is not coming out of nowhere. In fact, we're feeling it, something that's always been there. And that is the process of healing.
Yeah. And I think, I truly believe that Jessie, my first daughter, her soul contract was to trigger all that in me in order for me to go on a deeper healing journey. Now, some people might not connect with that idea. I suspect if they're listening to your podcast, Nikki, they will. I might not say that on a more mainstream podcast, your soul contracts, and but I really believe that. I really believe that she came in at that time to help me heal all of that. And my second born, Rose, her soul contract with me is to lean me more into joy.
I was just going to say, she's
embodied.
Joy.
She's joy embodied. Like, she stops people in the street with her light that emanates from that child's soul. Like, people don't know why they stop. Like, but they say to me, she's incredible. Like, random people. And I know that, I still have a problem with leaning into my light and my joy. And she's teaching me that. Jessie awakened me, and Rose is teaching me to just live in joy, which is my, what I want to be doing more and more. She just does that. She rarely cries. She is just unbelievable. And that's, what she's teaching me. And I'm surrendering to that more and more and more, and just laughing with her, just giggling with her, sometimes for hours, when my head wants me to look at what I've got to sort out and why am I sat on the floor just laughing with this, baby. And, but she's teaching me that. I'm surrendering to that experience as well. It's so profound. It's so profound that we get to, like you, not only do this once, but I get to go through the transformation twice, because I've become a mother twice.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Zoe, I love you.
I love you too.
It's such an honor to hear that story. I have heard it before, but I heard it deeper this time. I heard it much deeper this time. And it really highlights to me that motherkind was always meant to be something that you were meant to birth and realize. It was waiting for you to connect with it, to realign with it, to live it. And I'm so grateful that you did. Thank you for your courage to keep going through that darkness. That in itself is quite something, to be able to come through the darkness and find the light and find the help and to keep going. And I want to thank you for that, because that's a gift for every mother that you've helped ever since, and it's a gift for anyone listening here. And one of the reasons why I've even started this surrender series is because there's something profound about the human story. Like these stories that you're sharing, and it's not a story, you lived it, is a beacon of light. It's a beacon of hope, that these moments that feel like all the lights went out you know, there is a way through. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean it's comfortable, but there is tremendous gifts at the other end if you can just put one foot in front of the other. So thank you for sharing yourself with me.
You're welcome. Thank you for holding space and for inviting me.
Well, I just wish you so well. And Motherkind is just growing and growing. I've known you for many years now, and it is just booming, and I'm so proud of you. I really am. So what's the next kind of amazing thing? I'm sure you're doing something. There's something that you've just launched. Is there like a group program that you've just launched?
Yeah, I just launched a group program, but that's closed. That's full and closed now. So I'm very grateful for that, which amazing. I'm not sure the timing was very good because I decided to launch it during my 2-week house move. So I didn't really promote it very well. So I'm incredibly grateful that some beautiful souls found their own way to it, digging around from a hidden web page.
Well, you've just shown that you can sell out a program with absolute grace and ease and not trying very hard.
The marketing consultant in me is not having a very good time. She's like, what are you doing? Yeah. And I think for me, actually, you know, the next kind of couple of months is not so much work. It's more integrating into our new life, you know, supporting the girls to do that. Jessie needs a lot of emotional support. So really leaning into that, thinking about building myself a community here. You know, I'm trying to find those women who are, I was going to say spiritual, but not even that. Just some women who are interested in some deeper questions of life, who may be on a path of self-inquiry. You know, those are the people that I like to hang out with today. So I need to find some community here. And then, you know, I plan to write a book. So, you know, I'm going through the kind of final stages of a deal at the moment. And then that will be my next big project, is putting the story that I was sharing here and many others with some of my, you know, tools and ideas and the wisdom from the 180 odd guests that I've had on the podcast into a book. Quite a big project to take on. But yeah,
cannot wait for that.
That's that's what's next. And then, you know, the weekly podcast, you know what it takes to get a weekly podcast out. You know, that takes up a lot of my focus and energy. So I'll keep doing that. As long as people want to keep listening, I'll keep doing it. And then I'll just see, you know, I think it's always like you know, my business plan is always to just surrender to what is needed and what people are asking.
And listening, keep listening. Thank you. I can't wait for the book. I'm so excited for that. But really enjoy these next few months in your new life. It's been a hell of a year. There was a kind of a profound moment when you were speaking about being in Sweden on the island with the women, and you spoke about, and I realized I was there without my mask, and none of us were in our masks, and it just kind of, I felt the profound, just that moment of where we are now in the world, and that the remembering of that gift of gathering together in that deep connection is medicine. Being able to really see each other and hold space for each other is just so important and so healing. So yeah, that it just kind of felt poignant. So I hope that you enjoy these next few months integrating in this new life. It's your kids, I'm sure Jessie's been through a hell of a year as well, the last year in London. So I really wish you guys a peaceful time there, and no doubt your community is already going to find you very soon.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.